Also ich denke, ich bin fachlich sehr gut vorbereitet und ich sehe ja, wie meine Kompanie hier zusammenwächst und wie fit die Soldaten im Einzelnen sind, sodass ich eigentlich da guter Hoffnung bin, dass wir da erfolgreich reingehen und auch mit allen wieder heil zurückkommen.
So weiß auch der Kommandeur des gepanzerten Einsatzverbandes um die Verantwortung für sich und seine Soldaten.
Sie spüren die Verantwortung aber schon so hoch auf der Schulter. Das ist wirklich so, jetzt schon, wenn wir unten sind und bis dahin, wenn man wieder alle heil nach Hause gebracht hat. Das ging mir früher so und das ist jetzt auch schon wieder spürbar.
Ab dem 19. Juli wird aus den Übungen ernst. Dann beginnt die Verlegung des zweiten deutschen KFOR-Kontingents ins Kosovo.
Officials meeting in Helsinki, Finland say they are very close to resolving that dispute over Russian troops now in Kosovo. Our military affairs correspondent Jamie McIntyre is in Helsinki. Jamie with the latest.
Well, Bernie, when's a deal, and that is when all sides agree it is. And today, after a marathon bargaining session of almost 8 hours, U.S. Defense Secretary William Cohen, his Russian counterpart, Igor Sergeyev, emerged from the presidential palace here in Helsinki, Finland, and said that they'd made substantial progress, but were not ready to announce a deal.
Disarmament. About 200 laid down their weapons Wednesday only after being confronted by NATO armored personnel carriers and helicopter guideships. Serbs fearing attacks from the KLA continue to flee Kosovo, and CNN's Richard Blystone reports.
Panic at the Pristina bus station. Serbs and gypsies who've stuck with the Belgrade government, frantic now to get out of Kosovo. They know what happened here, and they're afraid of reprisals. Where's the government now, says this man. The terrorists are taking over, he said, and we don't know where to go or what to do. Go away, she tells our crew. It's all your fault. It recalls but doesn't replicate scenes over the last 3 months when ethnic Albanians were herded through a jeering gauntlet on their way out. Survival of the fittest, and this woman isn't one of them. Considering the size of the job, moving some 40,000 armed men out of Kosovo and half that many in, plus Serbs leaving and ethnic Albanians returning, NATO commanders think it's going pretty well, and they're inclined to be lenient, even though stage 1 of the Yugoslav withdrawal dragged on for hours after the deadline. Here, British escorts talk with Yugoslav army truck drivers about how to react if attacked on the way out. Just keep going, the British say. We'll defend ourselves, say the Yugoslavs. Don't worry, the British say. We'll defend you. Leaving its British escort on Pristina's outskirts, a Russian food convoy arrives at the capital's airport, where a couple of hundred Russian troops are demonstrating their independence of NATO with their own small version of KFOR, apparently on friendly terms with stay-behind Yugoslav troops. Not a problem, says a spokesman for NATO Commander General Mike Jackson.
The overall level of compliance is one that General Jackson is quite satisfied with, that the intent is being met. There will be the odd little area that will need to be sorted out later on, but we have no worries on that score.
Ignoring warnings that the danger hasn't entirely passed, Albanian families pour out of hiding. When word reached their hideout in the woods west of Pristina, this family headed for their burned-out home. We'll camp in the garden if we have to, she says. It's summer. We can just stay there in the grass. Richard Blystone, CNN, in the Kosovo capital, Pristina.
The flood is on. Aboard the same tractors they used to flee Kosovo, the refugees are going home.
How does it feel to be in Kosovo?
I feel like I am born again, he says. But the road home is not easy. Backed up for miles, heading both to and from the Kosovo-Albania border. Men frantically clear debris from the road. Cars and tractors break down along the way. A German tank drags a piece of concrete to widen the path. The German troops are in charge, but the KLA is everywhere. Tempers flare as a KLA fighter rips a Yugoslav license plate from a car coming into Albania. I just don't want to see it, he says. The chaos is just what the UNHCR wanted to avoid.
The systems aren't in place yet to help them back on the other side. And most importantly, there is still a large security risk, and we really are asking people to not risk their lives at this point.
This is the border checkpoint just over on the Kosovo side. It is where the refugees become refugees no more. And when you see their faces here, it becomes clearer why they are so eager to get home. I am so happy, says this woman. Today, we are going to be in our own home, says this one, as she and her family pack up at the Kukës 1 refugee camp. All day, people streamed out carrying what they could. In the markets in Kukës, prices have doubled in the last day. Many buy electric cookers, figuring their appliances will be gone. We'll take it to Kosovo to make bread, she says. At last count, there were 444,000 Kosovar refugees in Albania. The flood may soon be a deluge. I'm Jeff Flock, CNN, on the Kosovo-Albania border.
This was a day of comings and goings.
Another.
Long-lost neighbors gave them good news. Their home still stands. No one answers. Jamil Gachi climbs the wall, checks for mines, and opens the door. They are home. The walls still stand. The inside is a mess, but they are home. There is no electricity, no food, and no water. Urim Gachi spots something dumped in the well. He fears that it has been poisoned or even booby-trapped. Do not pull the bucket, warns his wife. It may be dangerous. Indeed, down the road at his cousin's house, a mine.
When a K4 German convoy passed through this village earlier today, the people here asked them to help to clear the mines and booby traps in the village. The Germans said they simply didn't have enough people to help right now.
Because of the mines, the Gachi children are left on the wagon and they seem bewildered. They want to play in their own backyard. Eventually they do. But everyone must step carefully here and in all of Kosovo, returning refugees and departing Serbs. Mike Betcher, CNN at Maji, Yugoslavia.
Fresh graves in an old cemetery. He said he had seen Serb police bury dozens of bodies there this month. At another village in the region, long known as a KLA stronghold, bodies were dumped in wells. Residents said Serbs had gone on a killing rampage just before NATO peacekeepers entered Kosovo. And in southeastern
British paras, it describes them as heroes for rescuing 2 young Albanian women from what it calls drunk, gun-toting Serbs.
Troops would stop at the Kosovo border, but experts say Russia was worried about being left out as NATO occupied Kosovo. So the Russians took the initiative and moved in on their own. Again, NATO is trying to avoid confrontation, despite the risk of partitioning the province. The airport in Pristina, where NATO had hoped to set up its headquarters, is still under Russian control. The Russians blocked the access roads to the airport so that when the first British K4 troops arrived in town last Sunday, the Russians wouldn't let them get anywhere near it. Later on Sunday, the Russians also blocked French troops from coming in. NATO had ordered the French to set up a fuel depot at the airport. This French officer asked the Russians whether they were going to cooperate. They said, no, not now. So the French turned around. The Russians intend to stay at the airport, confident it will guarantee them a say in peacekeeping operations. And the idea seems to have worked. The U.S. now plans to give the Russians some form of military presence in Kosovo.
L'ultimo muro, quello di Peć, ed è entrato nella seconda città kosovara dove ancora vivono 500 serbi. La tensione nelle strade tra la gente è altissima perché in queste ore si stanno consumando le ultime rappresaglie, le vendette più orrende. Venite a vedere cosa hanno fatto i serbi prima di andarsene, ci chiede un albanese. Entriamo nell'appartamento, un odore insopportabile, sangue ovunque, a terra, ma anche sui muri. Ed è col sangue che sono state fatte le scritte contro la NATO, i segni delle mani. Un'intera famiglia è stata sgozzata. Nel centro di Peci i serbi rimasti si aggirano come fantasmi, non si staccano dal vecchio albergo senza elettricità dove vivono i giornalisti, quasi fosse una sicurezza. I paramilitari serbi non sono lontani, qualche chilometro appena più a nord, verso il confine montenegrino. Ne ritroviamo le tracce a casa di Gzim Muchai, un ragazzo di 14 anni, ucciso perché aveva inneggiato all'arrivo delle truppe italiane con il segno di vittoria caratteristico dell'UCK. Gzim è stato massacrato nella cantina della sua casa. I genitori e le sorelle chiedono aiuto ai bersaglieri italiani per la sepoltura. Hanno ancora paura dei militari serbi. Gzim viene seppellito assieme ad altri 40 albanesi, 3 nuclei familiari, massacrati un mese fa e sotterrati in una fossa comune. Tutta la regione, tutta la Drenica è disseminata di mucchi come questi, fosse comuni, centinaia di cadaveri di persone uccise e sepolte.
I find it strange because I was in Rwanda for about 3 months when the massacres were on there, and for some reason, because you were in Africa, and you both know Africa well, because it was in Africa, you thought, ah, well, maybe that's what happens here. When it happens, a 90-minute economy flight from Britain, it's incomprehensible. But I go back, I mean, these stories, which I think will go on and on, then, of course, we'll have the gap, and then we'll have the horror stories as the kids get blown up by the mines, which will happen in 3 or 4 weeks as the refugees return. These stories do at least point out that we still have some sensitivity and we still have some fellow feeling for these appalling atrocities, like the 14-year-old boy.
Would be awful if we didn't, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would. Yes,
a lot of people are just reading, say, the first 1 or 2 paragraphs of a story and they're thinking, I can't read anymore.
But almost isn't that a good thing? Because you do get to the stage sometimes where you think you're becoming desensitized to these stories. I know it sounds a silly thing to grab hold of, but the fact that we're so horrified by this is perhaps a good thing. The only thing that did occur to me, I was watching Sky earlier on and watching the Serbs go back into Serbia and wondering in those tanks and in those cars how many people who were responsible for this were getting away with it.
Well, that's one of the awful ironies of this, that a lot of people are being shepherded back rather than interrogated about possible war crimes. But I suppose really they have to, the NATO forces have to say, look, let's get this place buttoned up, quietened down, so the refugees can come back to a reasonable lifestyle. And you have to let people slip through your fingers, I suppose.
And the next step, as you've been saying earlier on, is for the non-governmental agencies to get themselves organised, and then we're going to see whether or not Kosovo can actually be inhabited.
I thought one of the more poignant things that I saw tonight was, away from the horrors, in fact, or sort of connected with the horrors, was that man who we had a report about going back to his ruined home, and he was a Kosovar Albanian, and waving off his Serb neighbours. I mean, friends. They were friends.
And frightened, didn't they, when they left too?
Yes, but they were friends, and he was sort of shrugging, and they had to go.
These could come back to Kosovo. They've been crossing the border all day long. This frontier post was the saddest place. More than 400,000 Kosovo Albanians were forced over it at gunpoint by the Serbs. Now, thanks to NATO's firepower, they're back with big smiles. From early this morning, refugees in the camps in Kukes in northern Albania have been packing up. News of what NATO's been doing has raced around the tents. Now they've got the chance, they're not letting anything stop them. Most of them thought they wouldn't get home for years, if ever. Zarife Sasuri, 80 years old, would have walked the whole way if she had to.
They're going back to a place where half the houses have been destroyed, where there's almost no food, where the water's been contaminated, where there are mines and unexploded bombs. Before the borders opened, the United Nations said that a massive return of refugees like this was its nightmare scenario. Well, it's happening, because despite all the dangers, thousands and thousands and thousands of people just want to go home.
They had some idea about mines, but mines are only one of the problems. Unexploded bombs, shells, everything else, irresistible to little kids. And that's very frightening. I mean, they don't have that level of knowledge. They have no understanding of how long it's going to take to clear this stuff up.
As she crossed into Kosovo, Salia Demai said, "I feel so much better. The last time we were all crying. Our houses were burning." Only half an hour later, 3 months after Serb police gave them 10 minutes to get out, up the sort of dirt path that NATO says is a mine hazard, they were home. They knew the house was in a bad state, but seeing it was still a shock. They're going to stay. Rooms had been ransacked. Others were burnt. They insist they've checked for booby traps. Outside in the rain, Salih has said, "I hope someone breaks the necks of the people who did this." In Prizren, the last Serbs were leaving under NATO protection. These people were innocent civilians, and they were terrified. Kosovo Albanians are overjoyed about today, but aid agencies, desperate to stop them, think they could be driving straight into another refugee crisis. Jeremy Bowen, BBC News, on the Kosovo border.
To make sure that no one threatens the peace in Kosovo, and that includes the KLA. When American NATO troops saw these guns this afternoon, they were determined to remove them. The guerrillas were reluctant. An Apache helicopter hovered overhead to help persuade them to change their minds.
We're responsible for these weapons, and we have to turn these in at our headquarters. They're registered weapons.
But the American troops got their way. On this quiet country road, in front of our camera, they disarmed the KLA fighters. NATO admits it has done little of this since entering Kosovo. NATO troops here have had a quick introduction to the difficult art of peacekeeping in an environment full of guns. Today, talking was enough to solve the problem, but other KLA units may be far more difficult to disarm. This is why the KLA had come to town. Serb civilians were fleeing their homes. The fighters told us they were there to make sure the Serbs could leave in safety, but to the Serbs, it felt like a threat, not a favor. The local Orthodox priest arrived to plead with his people to stay. NATO will protect you, he said. The American troops promised the Serbs they would be safe, but all to no avail. In the end, the KLA made no secret of their hostility. They've carried out massacres, killing and raping, this fighter said. That's why they're leaving. Kosovo has come full circle. Now it is the Serbs who are fleeing in fear. And for all its good intentions, NATO can do little to stop it. Orla Guerin,